Think so. I think I'm ready.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Open Mic Discussions. This is our fourth episode, and joining me today is my good friend Anthony, one of the most world-renowned physicists in the world.
Got that right. Truer words have never been spoken.
Yes. How's it going, brother?
Good. How's it going?
Good. It's going good.
Yeah.
So we're going to be talking about many things. Probably a lot about physics, about what you did to get where you were at. Also, you're an investor in real estate. So, maybe you'll share those secrets as well. And then another thing I'd like to discuss is a video you sent me about David Berlinski.
Oh yeah, how about that?
Yeah. I watched that, and he brought up Sam Harris. You know Sam Harris as well, right?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. So, man, that'll be a great conversation to have. But so, anyways, first of all, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're at now, where you're from originally.
Yeah. Born and raised in California, and then actually I should say born in California and partially raised in California, and partially raised in Texas, which in my opinion is one of the best states in the United States. But
What?
maybe it's because I'm New York. Yeah, so now I live in New York. So my job actually took me here, and I started as an electronic warfare engineer, which I found incredibly boring, and then I ended up doing systems engineering or product engineering, and then systems engineering, and then finally machine intelligence engineering. And the last one is really my favorite by far. I can say I actually enjoy my job. I can't say the same for the previous uh, positions that I did. I thought they were absolutely terrible. But that's just I like to solve problems basically. And don't get me wrong, systems engineering that could be pretty tough too. But some of these other ones, I mean, I shouldn't represent it that way. They can be tough. It's just the work can be so monotonous and just
Tedious.
absolutely, yeah, real tedious.
Well, now wait.
Um,
So, what you're working with now? Are you working with AI, or what? What is that?
yes, yeah. So I do some AI, mainly on machine learning right now.
Mm.
Um, and so machine learning is a subset of AI, and so I do some um, supervised and unsupervised learning, and a little bit of reinforcement learning as well. Um, I won't really get too much into the specifics just because I'm not supposed to. So,
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
but yeah, I think I think it's interesting work. I think the future of AI and machine learning is absolutely phenomenal. Um, it's it's a growing field, and it's also a field that has um, a lot of fakers, right? Like people that have gone to like a boot camp,
Mhm.
and then they go to like a 12-week boot camp, and then
Mhm.
you know they find themselves in a position that's a little deep. Um,
Uh-huh.
my hat's off to them, right? Like it's a hard field, and so like to come on board with people that have been doing it sometimes for years, and have sort of gone through the ringer. It's tough. It's tough.
Yeah, I can imagine, especially from your position, as a physicist, seeing people come in that just attended a boot camp, I can imagine that would be tough. Like, well, so let me ask you, from what we're seeing with AI, obviously there's great potential with it, but there's also some scary shit out there as well. We're seeing like the deep fakes, about deep fakes and how it's been progressing in technology. I'm sure you've seen the latest like robots that they've come up with where they're learning quite rapidly. And what's your take on that as a physicist, as someone that works in this field? Do you think we're doomed? Is it going to be like Terminator or? Where are we going with all this?
No, no, I don't think so. If it ever does end up that way, I mean, I don't take it outside of the realm of possibilities. But if we ever get that way, it'll be a long time from now. Um, as far as like deep fakes and things like that, um, those tend to be like generative adversarial networks. The short short name for that is just a GAN. And so, and I've actually worked with GANs. GANs are really fun because what you basically do is you've got two different networks that are competing against each other. And so you have one network, which is this is the absolute crazy part of it, is that you have a pretty simple network, right?
Mhm.
That generates images out of noise, so complete noise, right? And so if you want to think about like your old TV, whenever you didn't have it plugged into the right input, you just get that sort of noise, something like that, right? It generates that random noise, and there's a discriminator which is trained on real data, right?
Mhm.
And it's responsible for saying, yes, that's real, or no, that's fake. And
Mm.
so in steps, this generative model, this generator, uh, so that information goes back to the generator, it makes a fix, and then it tries again. And that random noise starts morphing into something very realistic after some
Keeps
time, right? It
keeps
keeps on
learning,
getting
right?
better.
Yeah.
And it's funny, I actually before, where I work, I had a data set that I thought was pretty interesting. And I thought, you know what? I really want to learn about GANs. So on my off time, I decided to build a GAN. And so I built a GAN, and then I trained it on this data set that I had. And then I showed it to some of my colleagues, some of my superiors even, and said, hey, take a look at this. And I basically had a bunch of images of the real stuff and a bunch of images of the fake stuff side by side. And I asked everybody, which one's real, which ones are real, which ones are fake. Only one person got it right.
Out
Um,
of how many people?
out of, oh man, I must have given it to 5 or 6 people. But these are people that
Jeez.
are like, they've been in machine learning, right? They're some of them have worked on adversarial networks. And so the one guy that got it had actually uh, worked on an adversarial network, which is made to break a classifier. And so, long story short, they were absolutely impressed by it, and that work actually has gone pretty far at my company. So really happy about that. I was actually just meeting with like a junior engineer about it just last week. Um, to use it for one of the projects at work. And so super happy to see that.
Mhm. That's fascinating actually, because I remember when the with AI, with the whole deep fakes first kind of started or becoming more well known. I remember seeing there was like video. I think it was like of Obama and Putin and maybe Bush. I can't remember. And it was them, right? It was the face of them talking, saying different things, right?
Yeah,
And it looked like you should be. I mean, it wasn't the greatest, although probably now a lot of people will probably fool people, but
absolutely.
it was a scary idea. And now it's progressed substantially to where they've got it so well done that um, if that's put in the wrong hands, it could have a world leader saying, hey, I'm going to nuke this country, and then guess what, it's
Yeah,
going to start a war, or it could be saying
yeah.
anything.
And they actually did that with Obama too, I think.
Yeah,
Uh,
they did.
they're putting words in his mouth, and
Yes.
I thought I thought it was pretty interesting. Actually, there's a website, and maybe I
Is
can
it
share my screen really quick.
deep fake something? Is that the one you?
It's is this person real?
Oh,
Or
okay.
this person? I think
Is
it's
this
this
person
person
real? Okay.
person real. I think it's that. Yeah, which face?
So it's
Oh
gonna
yeah.
have Jim Carrey, right, with all his faces.
I know, right? Yeah. So let me share my screen. Oh, host disable. Oh, okay, never mind. But if you go to
Let's see.
whichfaceisreal.com,
Hmm.
um,
Whichfacesreal.com. Okay.
yeah, you click on that, and every day there's somebody new there, um, and it's just absolutely amazing. I mean, I can tell what the fakes are just because I've worked with these models,
Sure.
um, and and I can actually kind of walk you through telling how it's fake. But
But these are like well-known people on the website.
no,
Like,
no, these are people that don't even exist.
oh, interesting.
They don't
Okay.
even exist. But but the GAN is creating these people out of a data set. Um, uh, for example, there's a data set called Celeb A, and Celeb A has a bunch of celebrities, right? So they might
Hmm.
have, thousands of pictures of Brad Pitt, thousands of Angelina Jolie, so on and so forth, and and so you can train on that and generate a bunch of real looking images, right, of people, and they're all generated from these celebrities' faces. So it's a fascinating time for AI. I mean,
It is.
yeah,
Yeah, it's getting really interesting out there. We'll see where it goes. Uh,
yeah, totally.
so yeah, it's I don't know where it's headed, but yeah. So what we were talking about, me and Anthony were talking about right before we started this is, I just finished my degree back in 2020. At what? Let's see, I'm 40 now, so like, what year are we in now? I don't even know.
No, I don't even
Right?
remember.
I don't even know what the hell. So just to give you a little background, me and Anthony, basically, well, we used to wake tables together at the
Yeah.
ever glorious PF Chang's. Uh,
PFK.
PF Chang's represent what? And went to San Antonio College together. And, I actually originally was a philosophy major. That's what I wanted to do. You remember that, Anthony?
I do.
But
I
I was
do.
told by everybody and family and stuff, you can't do shit with a philosophy degree, which I debated heavily. But I ended up
Yeah.
switching ultimately to, remember, computer science security. At that time, got my associates, and then now recently, finally in 2020, I graduated with my cybersecurity degree. So
Awesome.
you can never give up. First of all, that's the most important thing. But we used to. I remember. I can't remember. We both were math tutors, right? Did you ever
Yeah,
math
that's
tutor?
right. You did. Yeah, I was a math tutor for some time,
Hmm.
tutoring algebra and then calculus,
Hmm.
and then and I even went to high school to tutor too after a little while.
Oh, did you?
Which yeah, I don't
Don't
recommend.
recommend.
Yeah, I don't recommend that at
Don't do
all.
it. Don't do it.
Don't do it. College was a lot funner for tutoring.
Yeah, it was cool. I enjoyed it. I only did algebra at the time. I remember taking that pre-cal class. It was just, I'm actually studying some pre-cal on my own right now, or not pre-cal, calculus.
Yeah,
But yeah, it was a cool time. You remember old Barrett? Remember that guy, Barrett 50 cal?
sounds really
Do you remember
familiar.
him? The real smart guy.
Oh,
Yes. Do you
yes, I
remember?
do. Yeah, I
So
remember him.
I think y'all kind of had some interesting exchanges, but even, he was a weird guy. He was a cool guy, but he was really intelligent. Like, this guy was extremely intelligent. I think so. He had, at the time, I think he went to some other university, he had told us, and he had done engineering. Mathematically, this guy was super intelligent. I don't know if you remember this conversation, but
Yeah.
we're, wondering, like, he had told us at one point that his, previous GPA at the university, I think, was like a 1.6 or something.
Yeah.
And we asked him, like, how the hell is that possible, man? You're extremely intelligent. And his response was fantastic. He's like, I'm just lazy.
I'm just lazy. And
Just
it's probably
lazy.
true. It's probably
Just,
true. That's one of the problems with some people that are very smart, they excel at whatever it is they enjoy, but absolutely suck at, even though they're more than capable of doing it, but they're just not good at it because they're
Mhm.
just not into it, right? But they could be. I guess Barrett was one of those guys. But yeah, that conversation does ring a bell. Yeah. You still talk
Yeah,
to him, by the way?
it's been maybe a couple years since I talked to him. I think he got married, maybe has a kid or something. Um, but yeah,
All right.
it was cool.
Yeah.
I wish we had, so in the old days, when Anthony lived here, we'd go play chess, smoke cigars. You remember that over at the
I
humidor?
do. I do. That was
Have,
that was great.
we'd have really good, deep discussions, kind of about like the video you sent me. I asked you about, what was that guy's name again? Let me see. That video you sent
uh,
me, the,
oh, uh, uh, Berlinski
yeah, Berlinski.
on the Hoover Institute.
Yeah, David Berlinski, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So did you
That's
watch the whole thing or?
I didn't watch the whole thing of that one, but I've seen him in quite a few interviews. He's pretty fascinating um,
Mhm.
to watch and listen to. Um, it, at a time where everybody seems to have something to say, um, there's this giant sort of there's just this lack of quality, I guess, in some of the stuff that people say,
Mhm.
and I'm seeing it all over the place, and I'm afraid to say that I've been a part of it at some point, and so but I'm
How
lucky
so?
enough to be one of the ones. Oh, it's easy to say things that are not well thought out and contradict yourself when you're not truly paying attention, right? And um, I think that's something that I have been lucky enough to be able to realize because it's so easy to drink your own bathwater and to stay in your
Oh
comfort zone.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and especially if you have an ego, right? If you got an ego, big ego, forget it. You're never wrong, so it doesn't matter.
Right.
Um, so yeah, I'm lucky enough to be humbled, I guess, over and over in my life. So yeah,
Yeah, I think, well, it takes that a special person because so many people, they the worst, I don't know if the worst, you have religion and atheism, like this guy was discussing, Berlinski. I had never seen him before, by the way. Um,
yeah,
but I
check them
thought it
out.
was, yeah, I thought it was interesting, just that video that you sent me, because he brought up Sam Harris too. And I don't know if you remember, me and you have talked a lot about philosophy and religion, and there were, I was at the time, like I said, studying philosophy, and I knew quite a bit about many religions. The only one I didn't, surprisingly, and still to this day don't know a whole lot about, is Catholicism. But you grew up Catholic, right? And so you kind of
I
told you.
did. Yeah, I did. One of the most boring religions I've ever been a part of, but also a pretty good religion in my book
Yes.
in general. I mean, it's come a long way from burning people at the stake, I should
Oh
say.
yeah. Yeah, I think so. Well, and that's the thing, is I thought his talks were interesting because, um, I don't know if you remember, for me personally, so I grew up, my mom passed away when I was 8, and I grew up with my sister and her husband. They raised me Baptist, and it was very rocky, though. It was not a good environment, to say the least, but I forgave them as I got older. But so it kind of left a bad taste in my mouth with religion, at the time, for a long time, actually. And I got into philosophy. We were watching all those different debates, religious debates and stuff on YouTube, versus atheism,
Yeah,
Christian versus Muslim, back and forth, all these different interesting talks. And I went through where, I considered myself agnostic, but I was damn well close to being atheist, right?
yeah,
And then probably, I want to say, I'm 40 now, but when I was 33, I started meeting, an interesting thing happened. I started meeting a lot of, really, really caring, and considerate, Christians and even Muslims, both that would, just really compassionate people that really give back to communities and so forth. And I saw this and I thought, wow, this is incredible. This is nothing like, what I grew up with, that, the people that like I said, I forgave them. But it was very judgmental environment, to say the least, and was not a very positive environment, right? But I met these people and I was like, man, this is incredible, and started learning more about having faith. And what was interesting is I have this good really atheist friend. and and so me and him were talking about it, because he's like, so you're Christian now? And I said, well, I grew up Christian, and yeah, because he's talked to me a lot about it, right? And he knew that I was almost like atheist, almost at one point, because I had a lot of questions, and then because of my upbringing. But I told him, I said, hey man, I said, the first thing I noticed is, I said, I started thinking about like people that go to AA, like you and I worked with a lot of them, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and I started thinking about all of them, about how the single thing that seemed to save them was faith in God, and like a higher, like a hope, right? And I started really considering this, and with the people I started to meet, I thought, wow, this is a beautiful thing. Maybe religion does belong in my life, and then, my atheist friend actually agreed with that. It was shocked me. He said, damn, that's a pretty good point. And I said, man, I said, also, the other thing is, when, I was living with this mindset of being, what I say, almost atheist, I was pessimistic, so pessimistic that it's a very negative atmosphere, right? Which I noticed seems very common for atheism, right? Yeah. And I said to my friend, I don't want my kids growing up with this type of mentality. Needless to say, I don't want to continue living like this, where you're just so critical of everything, And so for me, that's where, faith came into play, and God came into play. And I thought this was an interesting talk that you sent me, because, he kind of touches on that, how even from scientists that are used for political purposes, that have a superiority complex too, right? And I noticed he brought in Sam Harris into the equation. And with Sam Harris, he was amazing. Like at the time, I actually have his book on free will, and then one other book, I don't remember the name. And I'll tell you a little bit later, but something that I really resonated with Sam Harris at the time, but now it's like I've noticed he's just become very, I don't know if he was always like this, but I've seen people comment on it, kind of like just critical of anybody that doesn't think his way. It has to be his way, and so I don't know, it's interesting.
Yeah, it is definitely an interesting. Sam Harris is I mean, I get the appeal of Sam Harris, because he appeals to I guess what you would call common sense, which
Yes.
I can't even call it common sense. It appeals to people that have pessimistic tendencies, or people, I guess people of our generation in general, right? Because it's like everywhere we look, it's like, well, who cares? What does it matter, right? You hear this stuff a lot. Who cares? Why does it matter? Who cares? In 1,000 years, nothing will matter, right? And so that's one of the things where pessimism comes in, where you're like, okay, I guess none of this stuff matters. So who cares if I, cheat, steal, kill, right? Who cares? Because it doesn't really matter. In 1,000 years, we only live this one life. And I think that's a completely wrong way to view the world in general. And Sam Harris really appeals to that, right? Because he's like, yeah, he appeals to the pessimistic side. He has a lot of arguments. On the surface, I think they make sense, but then when you dig a little bit deeper, you're like, okay, I think there's some stuff missing here. But I don't know if you noticed, but Sam Harris actually, he relies on his on his education a lot, right?
Because
On
he's a
his logo.
neuroscientist, right? I think he's a
Yeah,
neuroscientist. Yeah.
on his ethos, right? So where he's been and the distinguishment. I think he's a very smart guy, right?
Mhm.
But that's the problem with him. He's very smart in a field, and you know, big deal. He's smart in neuroscience. Um, I'm smart in physics and math, but I'm an absolute idiot on probably 95% of everything else, right? So
Sure. Right.
I
Yes.
rely on, so that's one of the things that I think, um, people are looking for somebody to look up to, and Sam Harris talks a lot and he talks loud, and he just appeals. He appeals to the crowds in general. It's a travesty, really.
Well, yeah, he does. And actually, I don't know. Did I ever tell you I was on that? It brings to mind the app called Clubhouse. Have you heard of this app or no?
I don't think I have. No, Clubhouse.
I don't recommend it.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Yeah.
I
Reviewers are
mean,
gonna be like, yeah.
I met a lot of good people on there. I was basically in a lot of these rooms during the height of the stuff that we can't talk about because we now are being censored through communism.
Tell me.
Right. Um, so, I'd go into these rooms and we were talking about all the things happening, and there were some good doctors on there, right? And there's like I met like a virologist that is very well known, and many different doctors that were good. However, there's this community of doctors that basically you open up in this app. If you can imagine, you're in these rooms, right? Sometimes with it could be 800 to 1,000 people in one room, and then you have people like on a stage that are talking, right? So I have the opportunity to be on the stage and speak, right? And
Yeah.
at first, when a lot of these different things were being pushed, right? There are people that had questions, right? And a
Yeah.
lot of this community of doctors on there were so verbally abusive to people. It was insane. And it was kind of
Doctors is
like
in like medical doctors.
they had various fields. Some of them were medical
Okay.
doctors. So yeah. There was all kinds
Yeah.
of doctors on there. Some of them, like there's a lot of what's the term, like naturopaths? Is that right? Doctors that seem to be really
Uh,
nice. Not
oh,
naturopathic doctors or something, I think.
the
Or
homeopathic or
homeopathic. Yeah.
homeopathic.
I think
Yeah, that's right.
homeopathic. Yeah, and they seem to be
Yeah.
super nice and down to down to earth.
I know. I
And I
haven't
was like,
met one that I don't like. I like all of
no,
them.
I know. I was like, man, these people are the nicest people. But there was a lot of doctors and they kind of stuck together where they were brutally, and I mean, I've never seen anything like it, brutally attacking people, right? It's kind of like what you've seen
Yeah.
on, I don't get on Twitter, but what you hear on the social media platforms. And so when I spoke, I said, I said, what's interesting is, I said, the way y'all are demeaning people and using this abusive language, people that just have questions, that's all. They have questions, right? And concerns. As a doctor, that's like a red flag that maybe you either don't know your position very well or you're trying to bully someone. And I said, what's interesting, something I noticed on there, because there were some people, a lot of the doctors that I was talking about, they were talking down to people that, didn't have a degree in there, right? And I said,
Yeah.
I said, it's not something I talk about because I don't try to throw it around, but I have a cybersecurity degree. And so I'm pretty analytic, right?
Yeah.
You've got
Yeah.
to be. And I
You
said, I
gotta
have a
be.
cybersecurity degree, but I said, what's fascinating about, I noticed that you guys are demeaning these people that don't have degrees. Is I said, well, the vast majority of people that have degrees um, are theoretical based, right? You have degrees
Yeah.
in theory. However, you don't know how to repair your own damn car. You don't know how to hunt and fish. You couldn't even survive a day in life without the supermarket down the road. And I said, so you're all high and mighty with your knowledge over here, but
Yeah.
should the economy shut down, as we've been seeing, you're in some shit. But these people over here without the degree, the no trades like plumbing, electricians, they're going to be good. They're
Yeah.
very resourceful,
Yeah.
so it's
Yeah.
fascinating.
and that's yeah, that's a shame in it, right? Like you go you get your degree because you're trained to think that it's just the way to go. Sure, it's a way to become successful, but there's much more to life than that, right? And the problem is that you go and you get your degree, and you just think that you're smarter than everybody else, and and that's what's so like dark about it, because because how do you how do you reason with somebody that thinks they know
Mhm.
everything, that who don't question their thoughts or their speech, um, and that's one of the worst things that you come out with, is that sort of chip on your shoulder and you think that you're smart, and so if you're lucky enough, then you'll get out of it. um, but I say lucky, but I think there's a bunch of different things to it. um,
Mhm.
but it's hard, man. It's
Yeah.
hard. It took me quite a while. I mean, hell, I think I was a Bernie bro just like 4 or 5 years ago or something like that, 6 years ago,
I
right?
think a lot of
And
people we worked with in the past were, which,
yeah,
I don't have a problem. I don't agree with them, but I don't, I think everybody's got to select somebody.
yeah,
Right.
yeah. See, that's the difference, right? Like, so I was talking to a friend. We were debating about the candidates for 2020, and you
Which
know, I,
was that? So wait, okay, I'm so lost here. So this is the 2020 was with Trump versus man, I'm lost on this.
yeah, Biden,
Trump
Trump versus
Biden,
Biden.
but before that was
And
Trump and Hillary, and before that 2016, right?
yeah,
Okay.
2016. So 2016 was when I was with Bernie, bro, right? So that election was coming up, and I was like, Bernie, yeah, woo! And it was basically because he sounded like he had some great ideas. He sounded like a cool guy, and I'm sure he is. Um, and that was enough for me. That
Yeah.
was enough. And then all this stuff happens. 2020 comes around. I'm debating with one of my friends about Biden. I'm like, he keeps on slipping up. He seems to kind of just be slow in general. He's not a spring chicken, right?
Yeah.
And plus he does a lot of weird things. And and then we were debating about one of the debates. It was Bernie Sanders versus Elizabeth Warren, and so I had a lot of crap. I was talking a lot of crap about Bernie Sanders, and Elizabeth Warren too in her turn, right? I was talking all sorts of crap.
She's the American Indian, right?
Well, so yeah, she's bogus. So I'm okay. So I don't remember. I don't know if you ever saw that debate, but it was Elizabeth Warren who she says that Bernie did something to belittle her as a woman,
I
and
think I
she
remember
did that
that
on
actually. Yeah.
stage. So I went after Elizabeth Warren during this debate with his friend. I was like, "Yeah, she's absolutely terrible. She's a liar. She hasn't done really much of anything. Her ideology sucks." And so then he was like, "Oh, so you're gonna vote for Bernie?" And I was like, "No, he's terrible. I can't
Yeah.
say but just the whole thing that he thought because I was talking crap about one of the opponents, therefore
That
I
you're
must
for,
be a
you got
Bernie."
to be for the other one. That's the problem, right?
And that's the problem, is that, well, there's a bunch of other people. But that's what you're used to, right? Is people going after the devil, right? And to raise up this other person,
Yep.
and that's a very common pattern, I think, in people's conversations these days.
It is. Well, and it's something I've actually talked about with people. I said, um, just because someone supports a candidate, right, or a president, doesn't mean they support every single thing they do. Now, if they do support that president, regardless of what the president does,
Yeah,
or that politician, despite, let's say the horrible things they do,
yeah,
um, then there's a problem. But if they can say, now wait a minute, this president that I elected is sniffing kids, or this other guy's
yeah,
touching women, if,
Yeah.
we should be able to find a common ground and say, hey guys, if we really care about these issues, then we should hold them all accountable, whether it's Trump, Biden, whoever, we should be able to hold them all accountable. But the
Right.
problem is people are married to their politician,
Yeah.
and it doesn't, disjustice. But let me ask you something. So, okay,
Yeah.
so what were the reasons that you saw, first of all, with Bernie Sanders? You kind of mentioned it, but what attracted you to him? And then what was the reasons that you decided he's not for you?
Gosh. Well, for one, part of it was that, so when Bernie Sanders came around, 2016, where he became like, pretty much a front runner, he was supporting democratic socialism, and and socialism at the time, to me, was explained um, in such a diluted way that I thought that socialism was like social security, right?
Mhm.
But there's a big difference between social security, WIC, and all these other things uh, that are these sort of social programs, right? So there's social programs, not socialism, which is completely different. And so I started thinking about that a little bit. I started looking into socialism, and I didn't like the dark things that I saw at all. I mean, I read um, what's the Gulag, the
The Gulag Archipelago, yeah, in Russia.
Gulag Archipelago.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's absolutely terrifying.
Mhm.
I read about Stalin, Lenin, the Bolsheviks, um, Pol Pot. Uh, was the Chinese guy? Can't think
But
of
see,
him right
Pol
now.
Pot was Vietnam, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
but
So Mao in China, right?
no. So I read about these guys and realized that socialism was historically has been absolutely terrible. And then so I gave democratic socialism a second walkthrough, and sort of examined it with new eyes, if you will, and realized that it's actually it's a very scary concept. And so that's when I started thinking about it. And then, next thing I know, I'm I'm no longer sort of drinking my own bathwater, right? Now I'm like searching different things and sort of getting out. It was a very uncomfortable experience for me because um, I realized how much I had. What do you call those things that the horses put on?
Blinders, yeah.
I had these blinders, right?
Mhm.
And I didn't realize how much I had these blinders on until they were sort of, I don't know, folded back a little bit. And then before I know it, it's no longer there. And don't get me wrong, I still got blinders on,
Sure.
but not quite, not quite like I had, right?
Mhm.
My ideologies now are much easier to examine objectively, whereas before, um, not really, right? I assumed I was right, so why would I examine my thoughts?
Mhm.
Yeah. So,
And that's the problem with
so
ideology, and the problem with being young. And I say young, I mean in your 20s still, you're still learning and you still haven't really experienced life. I agree with that 100%. It's interesting because I'm definitely conservative, right? So what I mean by that is, as far as most important things to me, is the First Amendment and the Second Amendment, right? Free speech and the right to bear arms. We can dive into that. But
yeah,
on the opposite end, I do think we need to help people. And I think that, uh, you know, as the US, our military defense spending is, what I think, 7 times more than Russia, from what I understand, right?
which is
It's
the next biggest power, right?
it's a,
To
yeah,
Russia,
Russia and
military power.
China. Russia and China were outspending them, and I know it's difficult because you can always perceive the threat is there, definitely, right? But I think more we've got to worry more about maybe China, but do we really need to spend that much on military defense spending? How much is wasted, which we know is there's quite a bit of waste, and people making huge profits to where that's taxpayer money and it could be spent to help people. But the problem, you know, like with Bernie, you know, or let's say the socialists, where they push the idea that the inconsistency or inaccuracy for me is where they say they've convinced you know, kids that you can have free college and free healthcare, which you can. However, the word free is a lie, because what that ultimately means is extremely high taxes for everybody. And so it kind of brings everybody down to being equally poor, but you still have the elite, you know, because for some reason, don't you think, or am I wrong on thinking that a lot of people think with socialism there won't be poverty?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, that's one of the big things. It's like, oh well, um, everybody will be just about equal, and I mean that's not historically that's not how it's worked at all.
Mhm.
Actually, it's it's actually separated wealth to a much greater extent than even capitalism, right? Because in socialism, you actually have, well, socialism is all, it involves your entire life, right? It's not just like capitalism, for example, isn't socialism. They actually can't even be compared, right? The reason why they
Mhm.
can't be compared is because socialism is um, it's a way of government. Capitalism isn't a way of government. Capitalism is just it's how you run your economy. That's what capitalism is.
Sure.
Socialism, on the other hand, will take the wealth and distribute it however the person in charge damn well pleases, put it wherever they want,
Yes.
and it could be on a whim. It could be, they don't like a certain group of people, so therefore they'll take money from them, and that's what's happened with every single socialist country to date, um, and it's caused a lot of death.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's interesting. I don't know if you know the number offhand. I don't remember the number exactly, but you know, in the US, it seems like we all know about Hitler very well and the atrocities committed during that time period, you know. Uh,
Yeah,
However, but we don't learn about like what you talked about, the Gulag Archipelago and what was happening under Stalin, under communism, and under Mao in China, and how the millions they murdered put what, you know, Hitler to shame. Like his number of how many, I don't know the number offhand, you know, you'd have to Google it. But
yeah,
even the estimates, they say they think it was much more than they even think with Stalin, with Mao, you know. And so
yeah,
why are we taught, you know, equally? I would think you would say, okay, let's talk about both of these are evil, you know, communism and, you know, Nazis. I don't know if you, do you call it Nazism or what do you call that?
yeah. I think so.
Nazism maybe?
Nazism.
That you
Yeah,
would say, you know, well, they both lead to people being massacred and put in internment camps, you know.
yeah, yeah. That's true. It's not talked about, and I think the reason why it's not talked about is because um, socialism was a social experiment um, that ultimately, I mean, on the face, it sounds great, right? Like, um, everybody not being hungry and having a fair amount of wealth and being able to live happily ever after and sort of stuff
Mhm.
like that. And that's a very hippie sort of liberal way of um, uh, looking at socialism or looking at the concept, right? So for these types of people, which are um, you know mostly good people, right? They
Mhm.
just don't examine these things.
Exactly.
It's very attractive, and so with that said, um, you know they're going to be partial um, about these concepts, right? So when talking about the Soviet Union, for example, they might overlook swaths of very important, helpful, um, dark information, right? Um, and those people tend to be our educators, right? Like
Yeah.
I know, well, when I was going to San Antonio College, right, we had um, all of my professors were liberal, right?
Sure.
So they really glazed over all the stuff, right? Like, yeah, we talked about Nazi Germany um, quite a bit, right? We
Mhm.
talked about all sorts of things quite a bit. When we talked about um, the Soviet Union, I mean, it was like, yeah, there was a guy named Stalin, Hitler and Stalin. They sort of made peace, but then Hitler backstabbed them. Bad on Hitler. And
Let's
then
move on.
yeah, come on.
Right. That's right.
And so so I thought, man, socialism's good,
Sounds good.
because you trust your educators, and that's one of the
Exactly.
problems. And your educators tend to be liberal. Um,
Why do you
they
think
tend to
that
be good
is though?
people.
But why do you think that is?
Well, because um, I think part of it is like sort of like self-righteousness,
Mm.
um, right? You get to this point, like in the humanities, for example, um, you study history, and now here you are in front of a class, and you got pupils, and you have to talk about right and wrong. And I think one of the things is that there's part of it. There's a lack of religion too, right? Like um, one of the things that higher education tends to want to get rid of is religion, because there's a higher power, and there is there is a difference between right and wrong,
Mhm.
um, that is um, it's like, okay, like take the Ten Commandments for example, right? The Ten Commandments are the Ten Commandments. um, if you do any of these things, break any of these commandments, that's bad, right? And there's a higher power, and he's looking at you, and he's kind of like, hey, you're not being good, right? That's important. That's very important to have an observer that's more powerful and more perfect than yourself. Otherwise, you get to make your own damn rules. And depending on who you are, those rules can be pretty bad.
Mhm.
And so I think liberal professors in general, just professors in general, tend to be either agnostic or atheist or something along those lines, and that opens them up to being very liberal in general, I think, and so they tend to come up with their own code, if you will, their own way of, um, I guess, living life, right? Their own Ten Commandments, if you will.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I think there's a lot to that question though.
Well, and that's the thing is like you said, they kind of come up with a way of their own, like what we talk about virtue signaling, right? And for me, I've seen a lot of it over the past few years, especially worse than I've ever noticed it before, as far as people virtue signaling, maybe for many reasons, because they want to look good to their friends, or they don't want to stand out from the crowd. They want to fit in because if you stand out, you're different, right?
Right.
Fortunately for me, I don't have that problem. I don't give a shit. I say what I mean. I just
Right.
speak it. If I see inconsistencies, I'm gonna call it. And I see it's a lot of dishonesty as far as
Yeah.
virtue signaling, just to look good, or when it doesn't add up. And it looks good on the surface, like you said. It might
Mm.
feel good, but ultimately, I think that we pay a price as a society. You know, um, when you brought up the Ten Commandments, right?
Yeah.
And when you have no moral code, and it doesn't even have to be with religion, like let's say the Japanese, right? You think of the samurai, you have a moral code, you have discipline, right? There's
Yeah.
something that you stand for. But like you said, if you don't have any of that, you don't have a moral compass, depending on the person, like you said, man, that's
Yeah.
dangerous territory.
Yeah. And that's the thing too, is uh I was gonna talk about the lockdown, but I
They're
can't.
like,
Okay.
no, you
Just
can't, you can't
stop
mention
that
the,
part.
you can talk about the lockdowns, but you can't talk about the thing that you put in your body. So I think that's the only thing. That didn't sound right. I'm sorry, guys.
Yeah.
Go back. Rewind. Not the thing that you put in your body. So
All right.
yeah,
Yeah.
talk about the lockdown, but that's the only thing, unfortunately. And it breaks my heart because I'm not about censoring anybody. I think that
Yeah.
we should be able, as Americans, be able to speak and say what the hell we want, and then people can decide for themselves.
Right.
So with that being said, let's find out. So,
Yeah.
so what are you gonna say?
So one of the things that that government has actively tried to do. So during the lockdown, for example, you saw a lot of very unfair treatment to religious organizations, um, uh, and I won't go into it more than that. But that is sort of the left approach. And the thing is that if you look at, like, historically, if you look at Nazism, which is a form of socialism, uh, if you look at the Soviet Union, if you look at all these other things, the very first thing that they have to rid themselves, well, with the exception of Nazi Germany. So Nazi Germany, uh, Hitler was pretty he was pretty on board with Christianity. Like, he was on board with Christianity as a part of a plan, right? The plan was to get voted in, right?
Mm,
To get people
mhm,
to like him, and
mhm.
then basically from there destroy Christianity, and um, and that's basically what he did. And he traded that religion for a Nazi religion, right? I don't know if
Sure.
you've ever seen, but he's
Mhm.
got the giant um, Nazi golden. It's almost like a golden calf, if you will. It's absolutely frightening,
Really?
but that's
Okay.
what they do. It's a very Nazism is a very religious thing, um, but it's a religion based on Hitler's
It's like
ideology.
this state. It's kind of like I've heard of when they say they're talking about like everything that's going on. What I've heard is you don't have, yeah, a lot of these people on the left don't, they say they're against religion, but they do have a religion. It's the state, right?
Yes,
That's the religion, the
everybody's
government.
religious.
Sure.
Everybody's religious. Even atheists. Atheists are just as religious, probably more religious than most. Um, but that's another subject. But
Mhm.
so Hitler, after he got in, he started sending uh, Christian leaders to concentration camps, um, basically having them beat to death and so on, so that he can crush the religion and replace that religion with his religion, which gives him ultimate power, right? Which is the reason why he was able to, to get the German people all riled up and do absolutely horrendous things.
Mhm.
Even though, a lot of the German people weren't okay with this, but um, he's able to rile these people up. Same thing with Stalin, right? One of the biggest things. So Lenin, um, when they came in, Lenin and the Bolsheviks, right? They
Mhm.
come in, and the first thing they do is they start hacking away at religion,
Religion,
because
Mao as
religion,
well. Mhm.
yeah. And when we talk about religion, we're talking about like Christianity, in this case, right? Because the thing that, and this is one of the reasons why the Jews in the Soviet Union were murdered in such large quantities, is because they have a very strong religion, a very strong foundation since
Mhm.
day one.
Mhm.
And so if you go up to, a practicing Jew and you know tell them to do something that they know damn well that God says not to do, they're not going to do it.
Mhm.
And that's a big problem, right? That's a very big problem, because you need conformity.
Yes.
And the way you do that is by knocking out whatever religions, beliefs, ideologies that are currently there. Mao Zedong did it. Uh, who else? He got rid of, executed a bunch of monks, a bunch of um, uh, religious Christian leaders, so on and so forth. And then he put on his ideologies, which went pretty far.
Mhm.
Which, he was. They were all very smart people, and that's the problem. Very smart people with their own religion that they wanted, that they thought would be best for everybody to practice, and that's very scary.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that's part of what led to 100 million deaths between the two countries,
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
Just from socialism. I mean, those are estimates, of course. Could be more, could
Mhm.
be less.
Could be more. Yeah. Exactly. Well, so yeah, I mean, I agree completely. So now you said in regards to lockdowns. So what are your thoughts on all this kind of tying in together?
Yeah. so one of the things is when you lock down, who's gonna keep on who's gonna keep on meeting, right? They're gonna keep on doing their thing. It ends up being religious groups, right? 'Cause they're
Mhm.
like, well, if I die, I die, but at least I'm praying, or at least I'm like hanging out with
Exactly.
my
Yes.
community. Um, it, that sort of thing, that religious thing, is a threat to leftist ideology, right? Because,
Yeah.
for example, like how do you convince everybody that the world's going to end in 20 years
Mhm.
because of climate change?
Yeah.
Um, it's kind of hard to do, right? Like, there's really an absence of objective facts, uh, reputable science that points to anything even remotely close to that.
Mhm.
But yeah, politicians are pushing it left and right, and religious people in general, they tend to not be so, I don't know, swayed by these short intervals of ideology switches.
Mhm.
um, and that's frustrating for politicians, right? And so I think that's kind of like Andrew Cuomo was sort of attacking religious organizations here in upstate New York,
Mhm.
finding them, closing down their spots, things of that nature. They don't like them, and that's mainly because religious people don't like them, right? And that's a pretty big, you know, there's a vendetta there, I think, that's unspoken. Um, but I think that's a huge subject. I mean, I feel like I could really kind of talk about that for like 10 days straight.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. Well, and there's so much to it. Like I'll kind of tell you about a couple of things I was saying the whole time is um, apparently, they're shutting down churches, and I don't know if you heard about this, but in places like California, is that how you say it? California? uh,
with
uh,
with what's his name?
uh,
Gavin
Newsom.
Newsom.
Yeah, Newsom, man, I don't know how people are still doing it. Even Democrats, come on, come on, man. I know there's a lot of Democrats that have woken up, but
Yeah,
apparently strip clubs were still open, but churches were shut down. Did you hear about that? Uh,
it that I yeah, it doesn't surprise me. It's the craziest thing.
I saw a video it was in New York where it was pretty disturbing, where they had these, the left wing groups that they've been using go in front of this church during the lockdowns, during when you got to wear a mask and all this stuff. And if you can imagine at the church in the video, people walking into the church, and there's a crowd of these people. I don't know if they're hired or what, but they're being used to intimidate the people at the church. And there's a woman literally with her two young kids. They're probably like 5, 6 years old, trying to walk into the church. And this crowd of vicious people is literally attacking her verbally, and how dare you bring your kids out during this, you're going to kill them, all this. I mean, just the worst, right in front of the kids too. And later on, they actually went into the church and were saying horrible things to the people, and so that was for me pretty disturbing. I was like, man, I wish the news, the so-called
Yeah,
news, would show this. I think I saw it on Instagram. um,
yeah.
just insane. And then I'd seen, did you see that guy?
Probably got taken down.
What's that? Oh
It probably got
yeah,
taken down.
I'm sure. Yeah, I can't remember. I think at the time I had saved it, but I switched phones, or else I'd send it to you. It was very disturbing. Um, and then you see that. Have you seen that guy in Canada? That preacher he's Polish, right? He keeps getting arrested. Uh,
No,
he's been like, because Canada is like a damn prison right now. I've got a couple
I
friends up
know.
there. You know,
Yeah,
Eh,
I've heard absolutely terrible stories about Canada.
Crazy too, because Canada, you knew before, is this lovely place where everybody's so happy. I mean, did you ever hear anything bad said about Canadians before this?
No,
No,
no, not at
no,
all. Actually,
hell
not at
no.
all.
Like the nicest
Canadians
people.
are like all of them are nice
Yeah,
in my thought. I mean, in my imagination, they were all perfect. That's a great country. But
yeah. But they've been convinced to turn on. Yeah, I saw videos all through Canada as well, and in other places too, but in Canada in particular, where people were turning in their family and friends for having more than 6 people at a party or at the house or whatever. I'm like, have you people lost your damn mind? And so there's this
Yeah.
preacher, he's from Poland. He's got this deep voice with this beard. He's like, the police came into his church. He's like, Nazis out, out Nazis. And he gets, I mean, he gets you pumped up. And I was like, dang,
Yeah.
this is the type of people that we need, that have, you know, that are brave people, you know, and stand up to things that they know are wrong, you know. And so he's been arrested literally like 3 times in Canada. But he hasn't, you know, he has conviction and he hasn't relented, you know. And so now you've probably seen the truckers, the brave truckers of Canada have shut everything down. And even the farmers showed up with the tractors and stuff. I'll send you video, man.
Oh, yeah. That's
So crazy. Yeah, it's a lot of Americans don't know if this shit's going on or happening in all these countries because our media doesn't show it. You know, we're being heavily censored.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
Have you ever seen censorship like this in America, you know, as far as
No,
social media platforms and stuff?
no, it is something really. I personally, I'm not on social media pretty much anymore.
Mhm.
Trying to think if I mean, I'm not on Instagram, I'm not on Facebook, I'm not on any of this stuff. Um, but just because so many things are just ridiculous right now.
It's
I think it'll
toxic,
get
yeah.
better. I hope it'll get better.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's like, people that I was once really good friends with uh, have disowned me, have
Wow.
thrown me out with the trash.
The same here,
Just
man.
because, yeah, just because I say something that is not along the lines of what they were, you know, what they deemed okay, right? Um,
Well,
and
and I
that's fair.
actually, you know, I'm guilty of it too. You know, I got a brother. We were real close, and we don't even hardly talk anymore. I haven't talked in months. And I won't go into the details, but he was pushing this stuff on me and my family, and I didn't agree on it, you know. And we had our other
Yeah,
disagreements with things that were going on. But I had a group of friends that were very, you know, most of them in this group text were, you know, friends that I know, uh, you know, pretty far left, and you know, turned into a lot of political debate in our conversations in the text and stuff, and got pretty brutal, especially with everything going on. And
yeah,
I finally just said, hey guys, I said, this isn't healthy for any of us. I wish you all the best of luck, you know. And
yeah, yeah.
you know.
I, it's and that's the problem too, is that we're not. I actually, funny thing is, when Donald Trump got elected in 2016, the 2016 election, I showed up at work, and there's this really nice guy there, and I always thought he was the nicest guy. I was like, this guy probably has never gotten mad in his life.
Mhm.
Well, he was pissed. He was so angry, uh, and he was saying in the hall of where I worked, "You voted for Trump. Just just don't even talk to me. You're not my friend. You're not a good person." And I was like, "What?" Like it just threw me off. I never saw the guy the same way. And I've yet to this day unfriend somebody because of their political views.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, don't get me wrong. If I had like a neo-Nazi friend, I wouldn't be chilling with him,
Oh yeah, yeah, that's
and
a
I wouldn't
different
be
thing,
talking
but
to
yeah.
him.
Yeah.
But but that's not what we have. We just have people disagreeing about um, sometimes very simple things like that should be okay. Um, but
But
it's
that's the
treated
thing
as
is,
it goes on. Yeah,
people, it's all or nothing, right? You have to be all on board with left or right, or with that candidate. You know, for me,
yeah,
you know, like in 2020, I got by some of my Republican friends got called a leftist because I almost voted for Hillary. And the reason being though is because I think this shit out. You know, I don't just, like, I'm conservative, but at the time I saw this guy Trump, which I didn't really know too much about, besides, you know, I knew somewhat about his business um, background, but not much. all I saw was he was coming from, what was the shows that, you know, you're fired and all that. I don't even watch
Oh, The
TV.
Apprentice.
Yeah, The Apprentice.
Yeah.
So next thing I know, I see this guy from The Apprentice come in, and I'm like, well, I can't vote for this guy, you know? And I didn't really care for Hillary at the time at all, but I felt like, well, at least she knows foreign policy is what I was going with. A lot of my Republican friends didn't like that and accused me of being a leftist. I'm like, I'm fucking conservative, like, you know, but then I ended up not voting for Hillary because I heard some evil shit by her, like this audio. I don't even go into it, but I was like, I can't vote for either one of these people, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
Is it when she was representing somebody
when she was an attorney.
as a lawyer or something? Yeah.
Yeah, with a little
Oh,
girl.
that was crazy.
Yeah.
That was absolutely crazy.
And after
She
that, I
was
was
like
like,
laughing about it.
she was laughing, and I was like, this bitch is deep. I can't even vote for her, you know?
Yeah.
So,
Well, there were two things that I would say were I couldn't have been any more wrong in my life. One of them was being a Bernie bro, as far as politics, and the other thing was my idea of Trump. Right?
yeah.
That's like number two, because I don't know if you remember this conversation that we had back then, but I was like, dude, once Trump gets up on the stage and hangs out, debates with these people that have been debating their entire life, he's gonna get destroyed.
Mhm.
And
I
I
remember
was
that, yeah.
so absolutely wrong about that, because he destroyed
He destroyed
everybody.
all of
He
them. Mhm.
obliterated them, like worse than any politician has ever obliterated any other politician.
Mhm.
And he wasn't even a politician. Anyhow, so I was wrong.
Well,
I
I
was
know,
wrong
and
to say that.
that's the thing too, is like, so what did it for me is I ended up voting for Trump the second time because I was basing off his policies. Although I don't really, in many respects, I didn't like the way he spoke, and I did feel like he built up the the crazy agitation and division that we saw. But media also was responsible for this, you know, which I'll tell you about in a second. But I did like that he said it how he thought it, you know, because, you know, even back when we used to wait tables, I have this discussion, you know, with people. I said, look, what you guys don't realize is politicians are like Republican and Democrats, like the WWF for wrestling, right? They're fighting in front of us, but shaking hands in the background, you know?
Yeah.
And so like, even going back, I'm conservative and I never liked Bush, right? And so I ended up voting for Trump based off a couple things, where the first thing was, you know, I had heard he was making comments that they said was racist and stuff like this, right? And then some of it didn't add up, and I was like, no, wait a minute. And the things that they were going off of were like clips, right? And so that's your number one thing. It's like, if they're showing you a clip, you should go watch the full shebang, right? Go watch it. If there's a 30-minute video and they took one little 30-second clip or whatever, go watch the whole thing. And that's what I did. And when I did, I remember specifically, they said that he was calling Mexican people animals, right? Which sounds horrible. I was like, oh shit, this is at the time horrible. But then I watched the full 30-minute clip, and if you can imagine, he's sitting at a table with in California with all the representatives, and at this table, there are people from every race, Black, Asian, everybody, you know, representatives, and what they were talking about is the dangers of MS-13, the cartel, right? And so he was calling them animals, but the media took it intentionally out of context and misled the American public. And so all of a sudden I had a no shit moment, and I was like, well, wow, I'm being manipulated by the media. And then I started doing more digging, and then it became more profound, you know, and they did the same thing, and not just with Trump. I found videos with Obama where they manipulated what he said as well. And for me, I don't care. I just don't, I think most Americans should agree they don't want to be manipulated by the news media,
Right.
you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that was the problem uh, with why I was stuck for some time. Right, I was stuck because I was listening to the news thinking it was news.
Mm.
But but it wasn't. I mean, it was just them feeding stuff, and I think the roosters kind of they've come home, right? Like they've come home to roost. What is it? Chickens come
Yeah,
home to roost.
they've come home to roost. Yeah, because did you see the drop? CNN lost tons of people, Fox lost
Yeah,
tons of viewership because now people have caught on to this isn't unbiased news. It's opinion pieces, but worse than that, it's propaganda where they're trying to create a reaction of fear or of anger. And do you remember back in the day when NPR used to be like unbiased? Like
yeah,
used
I
to be
do.
amazing. I used to
It was,
love it. Was like nice and calm, like here's the news. Someone got
yeah,
shot today, or it's just like
yeah.
it was very calmly put. They're not trying to make you fearful or try to, manipulate you. But now they've gone the same route, and it seems like it's hard to find honest journalism out there.
Well, you know what? I think one of the things too is that technology is getting advanced to a point where you can, as a data scientist or whatever it is that you do at, let's say, a news agency, right? Marketing, uh, they can tell when something is very that draws a lot of views, and then so CNN, for example, was just like, oh, people are really eating up this thing about like Trump saying all this stuff about Mexicans. So then I mean, I think there's more to it than that, but you know, if it's bringing more viewers in, then they're going to keep on dropping pieces that are getting those views,
Mhm.
and that's unfortunate. And I mean, but it's pretty much being done across the board. Um, so Fox News actually brings in more than I think the top like two or three
Is it?
viewerships.
Oh well.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's it trumps every other news agency. I think the second after that is like MSNBC or something. Um, uh, another leftist
Well, I
organization.
think I think the one that's beating them all out right now is Joe Rogan. Our
Joe Rogan.
Joe Rogan, man, he's whooping all their asses as far as
Oh yeah,
people tuning in and trusting him too. That's the
yeah,
difference, is because Joe Rogan this whole time has been. Sometimes I disagreed with him because I felt like, even though I love his content, sometimes I felt like he was playing both sides, in a way. But then I was
yeah,
like, he's just playing devil's advocate. He's being, doing a good job of, seeing both sides and present it to
yeah,
his audience. And so that I think everyone appreciates that. And he's, people can see that he's trustworthy, right? Where with the
yeah,
media, it's pre-packaged information, it's programming for the masses. And a lot of people, like you said, at one time, you're like, this is the truth, right? Uh,
yeah, yeah,
this is reality and it's not.
yeah. This these are a stream of what's funny is going back to the religious the the whole religious thing. I don't know if you've ever
Mhm.
read the book A Brave New World. Um,
Actually, I can't remember if I've read it or I wanted to read it. I think I might even have it on my damn bookshelf, but I haven't read it yet. But I know about it,
it's
yeah.
worth it. It's worth it. Um, it's actually it's a scary story. It's like having the whole story is like the government sort of takes over and runs things the way it pleases, right?
Mm,
So basically, like a socialist society, um, and your every move, like everything you do, is planned, right? You train. So from day one, you train to be a certain way, and your certain way um, is guided by short sayings, like propaganda sayings,
mm,
right? Um, and I don't remember some of the sayings, but I remember thinking like, man, this trip. Um, so women, so the whole idea is that marriage is what's stupid, right? It's outdated. So
mhm,
why would you have marriage? Everybody should be able to sleep with each other and do their own thing.
mhm,
And moms shouldn't have to be moms, right? They should just
mhm,
artificially create people, and that's exactly what they do. And so they get an egg, and they get sperm, and then they incubate it, and then so children are born in this way. Moms never have to be moms, right? And the other thing is that um, you, you no longer have to feel pain, and the reason why is because they have this strong sort of opiate type pill that every time you start feeling a little bad, you just take that thing, and all your
Mm,
pain goes away. But long story short, religion is dumb, right? Every all the leftist things that you can possibly think of are
mhm.
addressed in this book. And the funny thing is that absent of all of this religion uh, is religious behaviors. For example, they all get together at a set time, at a set day, a set location, and they all hum together, right? And they all do this
Mm,
very
mhm.
ritualistic thing because what they're lacking in life is religion. And but for some odd reason, they all do this very
They're very
religious thing.
religious. Uh-huh.
They're very religious. But absolute great book. It's also kind of a scary and dark book too.
Well, that
Um,
reminds me because I am reading what I don't know if you heard about this. This shit, they're trying to ban this book, I think in the UK, 1984. All
oh,
the
that's a great book.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, that's
I
a
just
great
started
book.
reading that, like the thought police and everything, and I was like, holy shit, this is what we're living. Like
It is. Dude, there's actually so the book is way better than the movie, uh, but totally worth continuing that book. He addresses all that stuff. Big Brother, um,
mm,
really all the leftist ideology, and really, the Orwell was uh, he was a socialist, but he absolutely hated socialism. Um, and what I mean by that is the brand of socialism that came up. Like his idea was, what would be cool if we're all like, we didn't have to worry about this stuff. But what the hell is wrong with these people? Like,
mhm.
why are they eating vegan diets? Like, why are they so weird? And why, like he comes out and he says a lot of these things. And a lot of his work is actually addressing the current state of socialism at the time. And that's what you see in 1984 is him addressing that sort of um, Soviet Union type government, right? He doesn't agree with it at all. He likes socialism. He just doesn't agree with any form of socialism that has ever been
Mhm.
done. So
He likes the
interesting,
idea. He
interesting
likes
dude.
the idea initially until it starts to happen, I guess, right?
Yeah,
Um,
and tell application like the implementation it's far from the idea. Yes.
have you ever heard of? So that reminds me of this guy by the name of Yuri Bezmenov. Have you heard of him? It's
I don't think so.
Yuri and then BZ. It's Yuri Bezmenov. Okay, so check him out on YouTube. He's got a
Yeah.
shorter clip, I think like 13 minutes long, but he's got one that's like an hour and a half or something. This guy was a KGB agent, ex-KGB agent. The basically is on this video. I think it was in the 80s, warning Americans of the threat of communism, right? And what he does is he basically gives a blueprint of what we're seeing happening right now, but people don't know about this. They don't recognize what's happening. They think that all of this is by chance, right? But what he lays out in this blueprint, it says like, look, with communism, he gives a blueprint of how they destroyed every other country before, right? And basically, one of the first things they did in other countries was class warfare, right?
Mhm.
Divide people by
Yeah.
class warfare. But he said now with America, he said because of the atrocities with slavery that were committed, and then how blacks have been treated, for the civil rights movement, all these different things. He said
Yeah.
that the communists are going to capitalize on this, and that they're going to use race to divide us. And he said once they've done that, and he said they're also going to be indoctrinating through education in the schools. He said they've already effectively done it, and that was in the 80s. He's like he goes, I can't remember how he said it. He's like Stalin himself could never imagine reaching such heights with what we've done, with communism and the American educational system. And he says, but once all this starts to really kick off, he said, you're going to see censorship like you've never seen before. And he said that what the communists will do is they'll create such confusion where the Americans won't know what is real, what to believe and what not to believe. And that's exactly, I think you'd agree that we've been seeing, people, they're like, what is real? What's up? What's down? And so he gives more, he kind of lays out a whole blueprint. And like he said, he talks about what you discussed about, they're going to go after Christianity. That's what they do. They're going to destroy religion because it poses a threat to their rule, so
Right.
yeah, check him out, Yuri Bizmenov. It's fascinating because we're like living it right now.
Awesome. Yeah, you gotta text me that name. That way I can Google him later.
Yeah, I'll send you his videos. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. And the funny thing about all this stuff is like, a lot of the stuff is documented quite well, and as far as like leftism and leftist ideology, it's so well documented, and people that come from these countries are so against it. They're just like,
I know.
you guys
Yeah.
are absolute idiots if you think any of that's gonna work. And actually, it's a wealth of this type of information is comes from like Russian writers, right? That wrote during the Soviet Union. Um, they are so far against some of the socialist and leftist sort of ideology that they write entire books on it. Even their fiction books are based on, like, who's it? Is it Dostoevsky?
Dostoevsky, yeah.
What's the name of that book?
What was it about?
Oh, it was about a religious dude, and then basically a communist uprising, in an otherwise sort of peaceful setting, and one of the characters is his name is Piotr.
Piotr. Yeah, actually, I know which one you're talking about too. I can't remember the name of it though.
Been a while.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but that the whole story is basically this guy trying to break down religion and come out on top, and then start this sort of chaotic chaos, right? Uprisings. That's what communism really is, right? It's the violent overthrow of the government, and that's what he's trying to do. Is he's trying to create these very violent reactions and sort of generate this warfare, this uprising. But very interesting though. Russian writers, they know how to put this stuff so that if you just sit through and give it time, because these are some of these like that particular book is actually a pretty long one, and it takes a little bit of time to like develop.
To build up.
But once it does, yeah, once it does, man, it had me tied in. It's like, wow, this is evil.
Yeah, it is actually. The problem is, again, we don't we don't learn about any of this. The first time I heard about the Gulag Archipelago was actually through Jordan Peterson. You know who that is?
That's why I heard from it about it from too.
Yeah, and it, I was like, holy shit. But I also, through the languages that I speak, I'll tell you. So this is one of the reasons I created this channel. Actually, is for this very reason, right? So I was speaking to so many people from different countries, right? And they were telling me the history of their country that Americans, we just don't know, right? And so I was like, man, wow, I've got to create a channel where they can tell us about this history. And I'll tell you a story. So a couple of my Russian friends I was talking to live in Moscow, and they started talking about the history, that had happened there with Stalin, and they're comparing with Gorbachev. If you remember Gorbachev, is it Gorbachev? Am I thinking of the right name?
Yeah. Well, Gorbachev, when Soviet Union.
Yeah, he's Gorbachev, I think. For some
Yeah,
reason, I
yeah.
feel like I'm getting it wrong, but he was basically known as like he was drunk all
Talking
the
about the
time
dude
and
with
kind of
the
dancing. Yeah, I think
yeah.
that's the guy. Yeah, unless I'm getting the name wrong, but I'm sure people will know who I'm talking about. He was drunk all the time. My friends told me and stuff, but they were comparing the two. They told me, so they said basically during Stalin time, they said if you look at them with both of these guys, they said they had good and bad, right? And I was like, oh, good with Stalin? It's just kind of hard to imagine, right? Knowing how many people he murdered. And what they
Yeah.
told me is that, yeah, he's horrible, murdering, millions and millions of people. However, they said there was no crime because if you stole, boom, you're shot in the head. Right. So no one acted out of line. Right. So there was no crime,
Yeah.
no crime. Right. So
Yeah.
it's amazing.
Yeah.
Right. It's a utopia. Right. Amazing. So,
Absolutely.
so obviously it's
So you
evil,
get
but
starved to death or just shot in the
yeah,
head.
exactly.
Yeah.
But then they said, then they got Gorbachev, I think is his name. Dang, I feel like I'm getting his name wrong for some reason. But they said, anyways, this president that was always
What
drunk.
was he in power when the Soviet Union fell?
Yeah, I think he was. I think he was
Oh
right
yeah.
before.
Then
Yeah,
then
And
you're talking about the right person.
okay, and so he was always drunk, and they said he's like always dancing and stuff, and they said that I guess he had like 10 years of power. They said this is like the dark period in Russia. And what I found interesting, what they said next was like an aha moment. They said, so he had an opposite approach from Stalin. Okay. He basically dismantled the police. He dismantled the sound familiar. So he dismantled
Yeah,
the
it does.
police. And what happened next was they said that crime went through the roof. People were being murdered. And then gangs arose. They said the mafia. And so they would go into businesses and say, hey, you're going to pay us this money, basically. And so it became what they said was a dark period for Russia, right? Basically, complete chaos. So it was the opposite, right?
Yeah,
Completely
yeah.
opposite. And so I was like, holy shit. I was like, we just been doing this here, this idea of defunding the police. And what's the other term they use? Before they coined the term defund to make it sound better, it was
I don't know.
I can't remember what they said. Abolish the police.
Oh, there you go.
That
Yeah.
sounded too harsh. So they changed it to defund. And so we've seen crime is rampant in so many cities now, worse than it's ever been.
Yeah,
Uncontrollably in the US. And so I was like, wow, holy shit. He just told me a part of history that directly correlates to what we're doing here.
yeah,
And so
yeah,
it's like, man, we have so many things that we could learn from history of what not to do. And
yeah. We absolutely do. And yeah, there's so much of a conversation to be had, but it seems like nobody's having. I mean, nobody's having these conversations in a friendly way. Too is like I can't even talk. Like I can't talk about any of this stuff with anybody at work. Forget it. Like there's one guy that I can, and that's it. And we talked about everything from politics, religion, race, you name it. But and even then, like he usually gets pretty upset, you know. And then we do it all over again at some later date. But it's so rare to be able to talk about this stuff now. Like, nobody wants.
well,
Yeah,
I think
I was just
that,
gonna say that. Like,
no, go
oh,
ahead, go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No,
No,
go
I was
ahead, go
gonna
ahead.
say that we would show up to my wife's family for Thanksgiving and Christmas, and on the door it would say, "No talking about religion or politics."
Mm.
Um, you know, I thought that was pretty funny. I love talking about religion and politics.
Me too.
Yeah, so we talked about religion and politics anyways.
Yeah.
But yeah,
No, that's interesting because I was actually, I can't say his name because you know him, so I don't want to say his name on here unless maybe him and I will talk about it on the podcast because I'm going to probably have him pretty soon. But it's one of our friends, and so he has a completely opposite view of me politically, pretty much. However, so I was at his house the other night. He made dinner and stuff, and sitting there with him, his partner, right? We're like having dinner and discussing everything. Politics came up, and he's like, "No, I don't want to talk politics." I didn't bring it up. His partner did. And I was like, "Okay, cool. I don't want to make anybody uncomfortable." So I was like, I didn't bring it up, But then he went ahead and continued on talking about politics, right? And so I
Yeah.
was like, well, okay. I go, here's my opinion, and we talked about it probably for a good 30 minutes at least, right? And he goes,
Yeah.
you know what? I actually really agree with you with some of the stuff, not everything I said, but some of the things I said, like I mentioned about, never trusting Republicans or Democrat politicians. It's like the WWF, and how I feel like we're all being played as pawns, right? And but he said at the end of the conversation, he shook my hand and said, I just want to thank you, because I can't have this conversation with anybody. It's like with family or anybody. It's like everybody gets irate, And I said, well, I think the first thing is, it depends. I said the first mistake I think we made, which I made personally throughout this whole pandemic, that was when discussing politics, I was texting and doing it through, Facebook, and, you don't have the context, the sound of a person's voice. Like my voice is very naturally beautiful, and and like
I couldn't agree with you more, Matt. Yeah, definitely.
right. So the tone matters, right? So when you just send someone a text, you can perceive some text really, really bad, right? But if the
Oh yeah.
person, if you heard them say it, you notice that their intention is not bad, right?
Right.
So I think that's a problem we're having is, technology is new to us. And so I made the error of talking politics with good friends, the ones that we don't talk anymore.
Now you hate each other, right?
Right, exactly. And so, I think we made the mistake of doing it through, what does it say? Oh, okay, yeah. But so yeah, I think that was the mistake that I made,
Yeah.
and-
Yeah, I was actually debating people on Facebook and getting unfriended left and right. And and I was like, I wasn't saying anything crazy. I was
yeah,
just like disagreeing or whatever with things. And so that's just crazy to see that, right? Like if the conversation was like 5 years ago or something, it wouldn't be an issue at all.
it wouldn't
Just be
be,
like,
no,
whatever.
yeah,
That's just Anthony, just with his opinions, whatever.
exactly.
Great guy. His opinions are a little kooky, but great guy. Now it's like I hate that bastard.
Hey,
It's like, geez, man, I'm not a bad guy.
well,
As a matter of fact, one of the people, and we know this person, but one of the people are like, you know, uh, basically saying I was a bad person. I was like,
oh
that,
shit.
like what? I mean, this is somebody that I knew quite well.
Mhm.
At some point in my life, just to have somebody say that to me was kind of like, whoa, okay. All I did was disagree, and that was
Mhm.
it. You know,
Well, people have
so
become so over the top, I was actually surprised. I told my wife every day, I was like, my conversations on Facebook were lengthy, my messages are always detailed, but I was never offensive to people.
mhm.
I'd express
Same
my
here.
opinion, but I never attack people, right? I never say, you hear people call, what do they call liberals? I don't know, there's
Libtards
terms.
or
Libtards, yeah, libtards.
there you
I've never used that term. I don't, and I'm obviously, if I was leftist, I wouldn't use that, because that's not I'm trying to get my thoughts across. But regardless, I had people attack me viciously. And I tell my wife all the time, I was like, holy shit, they're still following me. I'm so surprised. I would have thought they defriended me a long time ago by their comments, but I think maybe, I don't know. It's
yeah.
it's interesting time we're in. But hey, I just want to, so I know you got to go. I
Mhm.
just want to end real quick. We did a awesome conversation. If you would real quick just give some advice. I know you're investing. You have, I think, what'd you say, like a quadplex or something? You have like 4 units or something. Is that right?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah. About five altogether. But um, it's two properties, but 5 units. And we almost we were actually very close to purchasing a 3 unit a couple of months ago. Um, but yeah, so I think I think that if you're interested in investing in real estate, it's definitely the way to go. Um, you get your money every month from your tenants, and it's passive income, right? You don't have to really. There's not much to it than that, right? You do have to keep up with the property and that sort of thing. But one of the things that keeps people away is that they get overwhelmed. Um, and so, you know, one of the things that you can do is to approach a realtor, like such as yourself, right? Like, you do real estate, approach a realtor, and then and tell them to bring you some properties that are good for investment. And then,
Mhm.
of course, you got to do your own homework and make sure that it is a good investment, um, and follow through with that. It's not for everybody, right? Like, some people don't want to deal with tenants or anything like that. Um, but I recommend. I think it's great. It's probably one of the better decisions that I've made. Um, it brings in a lot of extra money that otherwise you wouldn't really be making.
Mhm.
And on top of that, it's taxed pretty low. And so there's write-offs. There's just a lot of good incentives to investing in real estate, um,
Mhm.
that you don't really get when you like invest in stock or invest in some of these other things. Real estate's very friendly investment. Um, and so one of the things that I would say is, learn about it and then do it. It can be daunting, but just follow through with it. Even if you get
Absolutely.
your first house, like, if you're in an area where you can afford to get a duplex or something, live in one side, stay in it for a year, and then go get your other home, right? That you're gonna
Mhm.
live in, and there you go. You got, 2,000 extra dollars a month from that property.
Well, so when you bought this though, so yeah, you said, like live in that unit, right? And then you
Yeah.
can build on from there. Now, when you bought these units, did you use a hard money loan or how did you come about that? Or was it priced so well that you got a regular loan or how did that work?
Yeah, so somebody did approach me about a hard money loan, but um, I turned it down. So what I ended up doing was, I used the FHA for the first one,
Hmm.
um, and so really I didn't have to put down very much for the FHA.
Hmm.
Um, one of the things is that you gotta worry about them turning it down because of like safety issues. So we made sure all those things were squared away. The the second the second property, Natalie actually brought up to me, and so I was looking for investment properties like maybe a year prior to that, and I saw this very nice place. It was like 4,500 square feet, right? Big place. And but when I saw that it was commercial, I was like, oh, okay, never mind, because then I have to get a 7 year loan or a 15 year, um, and I just wasn't in for that, so I just left it at that. So Natalie, when she started practicing real estate, it was like, hey, check out this house. And so I was like, okay. So I saw it again. I was like, man, this place looks great. And same place, but she kind of like pushed pushed us to go see it. And so we did. And after that, we were like, this place is a steal. This place is an absolute steal. It's got a place to live. It's got a big office downstairs, and it's got a smaller office downstairs from that. So it's a 3 story,
Nice.
huge place,
Hmm.
and reasonably priced. And so we ended up going with that. And but we had to get creative, and so and that's what I mean by like kind of sticking with it and going through the motions. Is that um, I had to meet with the town's, I forget what it's called, but you meet with all the people that make decisions, building permits, all that stuff, everybody in one room, and I asked them basically to turn it from a um, commercial to what it was, C2, I think it was called, which
Hmm.
is residential slash commercial. Um, And when I did that, I knew I was kind of fighting an uphill battle here. And so what I did is I created basically like a almost like a layout, right? Like, so here's what the place looks like, right?
Hmm.
And this is what I plan on doing with this property. And so I kind of brought my A game to the table, just very nice, was
Oh, so you had like
um
a business plan basically.
oh yeah. Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, because I know Natalie really wanted it. So I was like, okay,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
want this too. Um and so yeah, so I met with these people. They liked me. I passed out the plans to everybody at the table.
Mhm.
Must have been 8 or 9 people or something like that. But by the end of it, everybody was like, "Hey, welcome, here." And they all proved it. We hope you come over. You live here, and so on and so forth. And then I left. I got the C2. Then I approached the VA because I was in the military, and and then I had to tell the VA, sell them on it too. As you know, the VA isn't really friendly with these types of properties. Um, but we were able to be like, hey, this is all just storage, guys. Like, look, we're just gonna store our stuff. And the VA was like, all right, cool. They were actually surprisingly understanding about it all, and so everything went through, and it it ended up very well for us.
That's
Um,
good.
yeah, so definitely cool stuff.
Yeah, that's a really important, like a lot of people don't consider, how you can, make money off of real estate. It's definitely worth looking into. Uh, Definitely good money to be made. And also people are paying off your mortgage regardless, and something you can
Yeah,
pass on to your kids, you know.
it's a big deal. I mean, right now in the real estate market here in upstate New York's gone up quite a bit, um, as far as like how much properties cost. But there are still some things there, some golden nuggets. I mean, you're like, wow, this thing is a steal. There's a couple. So when I first started looking into it, I went to Syracuse, and in Syracuse you can buy a $40,000 property. Uh, it's like a triplex or a
Really?
duplex, and then you can you can charge 1,400 to 1,500 per tenant. No, I don't do
Jeez.
that. I don't do that because I think, like, first of all, um, those neighborhoods are kind of sketchy.
Mhm.
Uh, and the other thing is it's kind of doesn't feel right. It doesn't sit
Doesn't
right
feel
with
right.
me, right?
Sure.
I
Exactly.
don't know what it is. One of the places. Oh, it's funny. We're in Syracuse, right? And in Syracuse, there's some pretty bad neighborhoods, really
Uh-huh.
sketchy, like kind of scary almost. Like you don't even want to drive your car through there.
Mhm.
And so we show up. Natalie and I show up, and we go to look at this house, and I talked to one of the neighbors, and I said, hey, I noticed this property is, this small talk. Um, what's the deal with this place? How are the neighbors? How are the tenants?
Mhm.
Oh, well, yeah, we just had a murder happen here just the other day.
Jeez. Mhm.
Oh, okay. Um, that's another thing is talking to the tenants. If you can talk to the current tenants, you should talk to the current tenants because
Mhm.
they will tell you everything.
Mhm.
Are there any problem? Yeah, my toilet. Every time I flush it, freaking shit comes out. You never know what you're gonna get. Tenants are the best people to ask about it. They'll tell you the truth because they want the stuff fixed, but it hasn't been fixed.
Sure.
You know, so good stuff.
That's cool, man. That's a great advice, and I'll never go to Syracuse. Thank you for the tip.
It's a good town, man. Just
Right.
don't go to just don't go to the sketchy neighborhoods, man.
Just
It's
yeah,
scary.
stay inside.
But part of it too is Natalie's got a lot of experience um with like leasing out stuff too, and
Mm.
so she handles a lot of that stuff. Like if anything comes up, you know, we need a plumber or something, she'll call up a plumber.
For
So
property maintenance, she knows, yeah,
yeah,
or
she'll
property
deal with the
management.
tenants for
Mhm.
them. Yeah, if I'm busy, usually she'll handle them. But other than that, it's a piece of cake, I'd say. Although you can have tenants that are nightmares, like absolute
Yeah.
nightmare. We showed up, as a matter of fact, we went to this property which is around the block, and
Mhm.
it was a triplex, and so we went to it. I met the tenant. One of the places was like completely one of the units was completely remodeled. It looked great.
Mhm.
Um, and then so the first one was upstairs. We met the guy. They had a newborn. Great people. They seemed great. And when we went to that little place that was like redone, then next door we went there, and it smelled like a complete gerbil cage, like some gerbil cage that had never ever been cleaned ever. And it turns out that they had uh what, they had
Like
a bunch of
ferrets,
ferrets.
ferrets, yeah.
They had a bunch of ferrets. And so like one side of their wall was completely lined with cages, with ferret cages. And and the tenant was just like, how long are you guys gonna be? Like she was kind of like hassling us, right?
Jeez.
And she just wasn't friendly. I was like, this is a nightmare right here. Like the whole property was dirty. Like everything around their little unit was just a mess. And so I told Natalie, hey, tell them, um, put a contingency in there, get rid of those tenants, and we'll buy your property.
Mhm.
Right? That was what we were gonna go for. It sort of we sort of decided not to after we looked at the basement and stuff, but that was the whole and the landlord was like, yeah, okay, well,
I'll
yeah,
do it.
we'll get rid of them. Yeah, I'll do it, sure,
Yeah.
buy the place, yeah. So um yeah, but there's a lot of stories that we can have about
Yeah, we'll
tenants
have to,
and
well, we'll have to do
landlord.
another one again in the
Yeah,
future, and
definitely.
we'll
Sign
tell
me
us
up.
about the stories.
Yeah. Yeah, I got some crazy ones.
Well, hey, brother,
Cool.
thank you for coming on the podcast. I know people are going to enjoy the discussion. We have
Definitely.
some
Thanks
really
for having
interesting
me.
topics. Yeah, absolutely. So to all the listeners, make sure to subscribe, like, share this channel, and comment below. Let us know what you think, and we look forward to hearing your comments. Thank you, Anthony.
All right.
Have a great night,
Thanks a
brother.
lot,
It's good
Matt.
to see you.
All right. All right. Catch you later.
All right, take care,
All
man.
right.
Bye-bye.